Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Here, Luna, I'll take this back. Luna, you're not.
Can everyone please mute their microphones? Thank you. All right, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kathleen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen Vigiabergia, your VP of Programming, and I'm so excited to see the number of members that have signed up to participate in our first ever virtual conference. So thank you all for taking time to attend and to see our sessions and provide feedback, since this is the first time we're doing this. So our keynote speaker today is Stephanie Slocum. She is a professional engineer and a 15-year veteran of the civil engineering industry. She is the founder of Engineers Rising, LLC. She's also the author of the book, She Engineers, and the mother to 3 young daughters. So she graduated with her master's degree in architectural engineering in 2002, and she has lived and worked both in the South and Mid-Atlantic states. She has extensive experience in building structural design and project management, and has been involved with engineering projects totaling more than $500 million in overall construction costs. She is also the recipient of the 2020 Women of Technology Award for her work empowering and supporting women in their engineering careers. So I was so lucky enough to touch base with Stephanie and get to meet her, and I thought that she would be a wonderful addition to our conference this year as one of our keynote speakers. So Stephanie, I'll let you take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Kat and Kathleen, for having me here today. I am super excited, and I want to start out with just say, it's such an honor to be here, and this is such a very, very important topic. Today we're going to talk about how to build confidence specifically for students and new graduates. But this is something I have talked about with women that have 20 years of experience that may still be struggling a bit with building confidence. So the things we're going to talk about, the things you're going to learn today, the things we're going to workshop today, are things that you will be able to take with you throughout your entire career from wherever you are now. If you are a student that hasn't graduated, if you have a couple years experience, if you have been in the industry for decades, these will help you no matter where you are at. So let's go ahead and get started. So I am Stephanie Slocum. I am an engineer, author, and I am a career coach with a specialty of women in engineering. As Kathleen mentioned, I have a whole lot of experience in building structures, so the architecture, engineering, construction industry. 2 years ago, I founded my own company, Engineers Rising, LLC, and I am the author of the Amazon.com bestseller, She Engineers. Stick with me to the end of this presentation, and I will post a link in the chat to go ahead and get a free digital copy of this book so it can help you in your career. So first, what is confidence, and why does it even matter? Like, this seems like a kind of a frou-frou idea, right? Like you see someone, you're like, oh, well, they have confidence or they don't. There's no class in an engineering curriculum on confidence. So I think sometimes we think that a skill like this really doesn't have bearing on our engineering careers. So confidence is defined as a conviction that you have the ability to meet your life and career challenges and succeed. We will come back to this definition a couple times during this presentation, but I wanted to first make sure we're all on the same page as to what is confidence. So to get us kicked off, and I'll warn you, this is going to be a very interactive presentation. So if you are like checking your email on the other screen or watching like funny cat videos or something, I'm going to bring you back to me now for our first kind of interactive thing here. So right now, right where you are, if you had to give yourself a scale of 1, I'm not feeling confident about my career prospects, or 5, I am super confident that things are going to go well for me, Where are you right now? Type it in. I would love to just type it into a chat number from 1, not confident, to 5, very confident. Where are you? Okay, so I'm seeing the whole gamut. Lots of 2s and 3s, occasional 5, the occasional 1. So yeah, I mean, we are all over the board on this. Okay, so it turns out that there is a direct correlation between your level of confidence and being successful in your career. But you do not have to take my word on this. Part of what I do is I interview successful women and engineers across a whole bunch of different industries. So let's see what some of them told me about how important confidence is for them. So for example, Amber Sturck, who is a petroleum engineer, she's from Texas, she has said that confidence has enabled her to go after opportunities. And she's found that if she hesitates to go after them, someone else will take that opportunity and she would be left behind. Amanda Farr, who's an electrical engineer who actually got an MBA and is now using her skills to mesh the financial industry with engineering, says, I really live by this motto of owning your career, owning your life, and making the best decision about you, which once again boils down to having confidence in your skills. Then we have Amber Freud, who is the CEO of a software company called Risa. And she says, and I will also add, she has 2 daughters of her own that are in elementary school. And she says that she thinks women create our own obstacles because we want to be 100% sure we're going to get it right before we try something. We know we have the ability, but sometimes we just don't have the confidence to go do it. And so she says, I think you just have to kind of pretend that you do have the confidence and take action until that confidence actually comes. Lastly, we have Robin Kemper, who is ASCE, so that's the American Society of Civil Engineers, their past president. And she has told me many stories of, for example, civil engineers, we want to get our licensure exam in that industry. You kind of need a certain credential to advance. She actually failed that exam 3 times, but she kept on trying. She kept on building that confidence over and over again. And this is someone who is extremely well respected and successful in the industry. And what she says is, don't let anyone ever tell you that you can't do something. If you want to do it, do it. This belief has been the key to my own success. So the point here is that successful women in engineering, successful women in any field, have to have very high confidence in themselves and their abilities to figure things out so that they can move forward in their lives, in their careers. So when you do that, what does that do for you? Confident women are more successful and happier at work. They make more money. They also make a difference in the world using their own unique skills and talents. So I'm curious, for you, is there one of these that particularly resonates with you? The green, the blue, or the red? Is there one of them that you're like, that one is the one I want in my career? And if it's all of them, that's fine. Say all of them. But I'm curious that for you, right where you are right now, which one of these is what you really want out of being confident and being able to own your career? I see green, red, all. Green, red, red, and green. Yeah, yeah. And I am right there with you. So the good news here is that confidence, it's really a mindset. It is a mindset that can be learned, and it isn't stagnant throughout your career. So what that means is, for example, if you gave yourself a 1 or a 2 on the confidence scale exercise we did a couple minutes ago, you're not stuck with that level of confidence forever. On the flip side, that also means that even if you gave yourself a 4 or a 5, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to have high confidence in all the situations you will encounter throughout your career. So my goal today is to give you both some inspiration through sharing my own high and low points when it came to having confidence and going for what I wanted in my own career, to giving you some very practical, pragmatic, quick, easy, and free tips that you can use to shore up your own confidence now and in those moments that you'll experience down the road when you're really experiencing your own personal confidence crisis. So if all that sounds good to you, whoops, went too fast, type yes into the question box and we will continue on. And thank you to everybody that is participating and typing in yes. Okay, so let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover and then we're going to go. So first, I'm going to give you a very short, it's like 15 minutes, TED style confidence talk that is part inspiration, part story. And the really cool thing, so this particular talk has been given in front of multiple national women in engineering audiences. And so I am excited to bring it to you today, just because it has been so very well received everywhere I've given it. There's a lot of vulnerability in this story, so I hope you'll come out of it understanding that you aren't alone if you're sitting here right now and feeling like, you know, I really don't, I'm really not sure if I can be successful here. After I do that, I will talk about confidence myths, things that engineers in particular get wrong about how we think about confidence. And finally, I will share 4 hacks to build confidence, and we will workshop every single one of them together right here and now so that you have practiced the things that you can do to build confidence once already, and then you can carry that forward. Finally, we'll go to Q&A. I am an ask anything type of person. You'll see I tend to be very blunt. I will tell people what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. So when we get to Q&A, anything goes. If you want to ask questions about confidence, you can. If you want to ask questions about my career trajectory or having 3 little kids and engineering, have at it. So with that, let's go into the inspirational part of this discussion. Okay, so this is called the power of yes. So I'm going to start out with this question: what if? And I wonder how many times a day you ask yourself, what if? For me, when I went to college, I asked myself, what if, a lot about my major. I did not start out in engineering. I started out in biochemistry. And then I thought about going into music education, very, very different. I took a computer engineering class. It was a C++ coding class. The most boring class I have ever taken in my life for me. Kudos to all of you who are computer engineers out there. I knew that wasn't the right major for me. And I kept on asking myself this question: what if, like, what should I be doing with the rest of my life? Finally, one day, I had a friend that I socialized with, and we played tennis. And he came to play tennis with a architectural building model. And I knew he was an engineer because we were all in the same like calculus and physics classes together. I said, what engineering major do you get to do that in? What major do you get to build cool artistic models and do all the math and science? And that actually is how I found architectural engineering, which was my eventual major. But those what ifs and those doubts, they were prevalent not just throughout my major selection, but then they continued on. So for a recent example, this presentation. So to in preparation for this presentation and talking to you today, so full disclosure, I'm an introvert, so public speaking does not come naturally to me. I spent more than 40 hours at this point prepping the presentation, practicing it. When I've done it in person, it's been, okay, go through 5 outfit changes before I decide what I'm going to wear. And I say this as someone who's fairly experienced in doing this now, that these what ifs still continue. And I think it's very natural for a lot of us to kind of ruminate over, what if I do this and it doesn't work? What if, I have tech issues with the presentation today? And I feel like some people will be like, oh, well, that's just planning, preparation, that's a good thing. It is a good thing. But on the other hand, planning and preparation taken to the extreme where you're ruminating over what about all these bad things that could happen to me in my life and my career is not a good thing and can keep you stuck and stagnated. So at work, and definitely at school for any of my students here, often thinking and ruminating about all the what ifs that could possibly happen from an engineering design and analysis standpoint is rewarded. But the challenge is they can also undermine your confidence. So maybe you completed a spreadsheet and you're in your first job, you sent that spreadsheet to your manager to review, and it's been days and you've heard nothing. So now you're starting to wonder, what did I do wrong? Or maybe you went, you're in an internship and you went to your first meeting and you thought you were like prepared for this meeting, but then when you tried to state your point, you were interrupted by other people at the meeting when you tried to speak. So now when that happens, you think to yourself that maybe those attending the meeting don't think you're smart enough to be speaking, and there's a little voice in the back of your head that may be wondering if you should even bother trying to speak up next time. Maybe you are in a field where you are in a, you go to construction sites, you're in a plant, a manufacturing facility, and you've had interactions with people, contractors, for example, that, they questioned whether you were an engineer at all. I had one case for me that I took I was a project manager, took a junior male colleague with me, and they tried to defer to him instead of me when I was the one who had designed the project. Lastly, and you may be experiencing this right now if you're one of the folks fortunate to be able to be working from home right now. A lot of us are in a situation right now where we feel like we kind of have to take what we can get from our employers. So, sometimes you'll be working a lot of overtime and you might think you deserve a raise, but then you start to wonder if you should just be grateful for your job. What would your boss think of you if you asked? And these same sort of thoughts might go through your head if, for example, you're trying to negotiate a job offer. So all these what ifs, sometimes they can spark innovations and ideas. Things like space exploration, the internet, your phone, and even simply listening to me today, being in this virtual room as a woman, none of these would have been possible if someone before us had not asked, what if there's a better way? But those what ifs can also paralyze us. They can keep us from living up to our potential. They can tell you that you don't belong, that you're not good enough, and that you have to be perfect to be successful. They are the voices inside you that tell you if you just practice a little bit more, work harder than anybody else around you, and plan for every possible scenario, if you're perfect, that you will then be worthy of success. So let me share with you what happened when I said yes to all of those voices that told me I had to be perfect in order to be successful. So at first, I was pretty successful by most measures. Since my primary way of dealing with those voices, dealing with that lack of confidence in myself, was to bust my butt and work harder My employer at the time was completely on board with that. Yet the more I tried to shove those what ifs into the corner of my mind, I tried to ignore them and put them in a box, the more they came out at unexpected moments. So like the time that 3 months into my first job, I brought homemade cookies to share. And let me say, I love to bake breads, cookies, any dessert sorts of things. That's my jam. So I made some homemade cookies, and one of the senior managers in the engineering where I was working took a bite and commented, "This is why we need women in the engineering department." I was the first of 2 women hired into that department, and this was in this millennium. So we're talking like 2004, 2005 time frame. Then I was at a lunch and learn, or I was attending, and I asked a question: why are there no women in leadership positions at the firm, this particular firm that was doing the lunch and learn? It was an office of 1,000 people, so in my mind, I'm like, there's no excuse. There's definitely some qualified women in this group. The owner of the firm, so there were, I think, 7 owners there. One of them responded and said, "Well, we did have one woman, but she decided she wanted to have a family." And so my thought is, and this is pretty much word for word what I recollect him saying. He's like, at some point, if you're a woman, you're just going to have to choose between family and having a career. Then there was the time I was in discussion with a client who, during a disagreement, attempted to make his point by saying, "Now, honey," and then I've had times and times and times again when a well-meaning person, and I'm not telling you all of these things to discourage you. I love being an engineer. This is such a rewarding profession. But sometimes, as I've shared, you will hear things and you will hear things that you are tempted to believe are true, that will feed low confidence, low self-esteem. And at the time, most of these things happened in my very first job, in the very first couple years. And at the time, I believed them. So I don't want that to happen to you, which is why I'm sharing some of these experiences with you now. So, all these things are going around in my head, and I'm still working hard doing what I think is a really good job on the engineering analysis, project management, all of that stuff. And I projected a very kind of, I got this face to the world in my office. But on the inside, I felt some of the things you see on the screen. I did not have the benefit of having been in a engineering sorority like all of you ladies have on the call at the time, which I think made it worse. Like, you're already a step ahead of me because you have a social group of other engineers that will support you along the journey. But if you've ever felt these things, for example, in any of your engineering classes, or you feel this in any of your jobs where you might be the only one, I want you to know that you are not alone. But the challenge here is for me that all these thoughts eventually came into my head as in thinking things like, I'm not good enough, I don't belong. They changed into this feeling of complete overwhelm and busyness and feeling like I just had to work all hours of the day and night to make sure I was good enough. I'm not going to ask you to type in maybe if you can relate to this. I just want you to think about it for a moment. Can you relate to maybe those feelings anywhere along your career trajectory so far, as to feeling, those weights of exhaustion and feeling alone and overwhelmed? And if you do, as I said, you're not alone in those feelings. So it was at this point that I started to notice that my male colleagues didn't experience This kind of constant self-doubt, these what ifs traveling around in my head about, you know, why do I not feel like I'm good enough? And then when I realized that, I started to wonder, okay, problem-solving engineering brain kicks on. Why is that? So I did a little research and I found out that my what ifs and your what ifs are a product of how girls, and I'm specifically going to speak to how girls in the United States are raised, how we are raised from childhood. So if you think back to your days in elementary school, if your experience is anything like mine, you were rewarded for sitting still, waiting to talk until you raised your hand, and being generally well behaved. You were rewarded for avoiding conflict and risk and being the peacekeeper. I remember at recess in elementary school, girls were warned against swinging too high while boys were roughhousing with each other on the opposite side of the playground. And, you know, that's don't swing too high in elementary school, then morphed into, you know, don't walk alone at night or watch what you wear when you go out when I got to college and beyond. When you look at how boys are raised, on the other hand, while they aren't exactly rewarded for bad behavior, they just aren't generally held to the same behavioral standards. The boys are expected to take risks even to their own detriment. I think, you know, broken arms, broken legs, broken stuff from tinkering were common. Natural curiosity and trying new things, as opposed to good behavior, is generally encouraged in boys. So as a result of that, boys learn to take risks, think for themselves, and take setbacks in stride at a young age. Girls, except for rare exceptions, generally don't turn to take risks. Instead, we learn to ask permission. So those what ifs then, they're not a result of this is just the way we are. They're a result of how we were taught to behave, to act, and to think as a child. For my students right now, and for the new grads, you'll remember being a student. Think about sitting in a class and raising your hand for the professor to call on you. If you were to sit in a class and like actively disagree with the professor, that would be heavily discouraged in most university environments. Yet to succeed in the workforce, being able to navigate, to do that with grace is required to be successful. So when you couple that with the fact that we're in a field where women in some places are still considered an oddity, it shouldn't come as a surprise that even when we put on a brave face and appear successful to the outside world, that we often feel like we have a lack of confidence or a confidence crisis on the inside. Now, we can't change the past, but the good news is that since, like I said, this is something we have learned, we can unlearn it. Okay, so I want to just stop a moment and really let this sink in. That uncomfortable feeling that you get when you try something new that you've never done before, that's a learned behavior. That nervousness that you feel whenever you think about, let alone do something that requires public speaking, that is also learned. The trepidation you feel when you walk into your boss's office, your professor's office to ask for anything, that's learned too. And it's so learned that you might believe at this point that it's your natural personality. I know I did. I thought I just wasn't a risk taker. I just wasn't that kind of person that would just go for it. And perhaps you, like me, may have even worn unhealthy perfectionism behaviors as a badge of honor, when in fact, an obsession with being perfect is a symptom of low confidence. Now, unlearning this, I mean, you didn't learn it overnight. Unlearning it takes time. And sometimes it's hard to know where to even start. You've probably heard the advice, step out of your comfort zone. but how do you actually do that? And what does that actually mean? What do you do when you are paralyzed by what to do next? And think to yourself, well, I'm just staying in my comfort zone, staying in my lane is really the only way you can function. What happens to you if you're just feeling stuck? Okay, so for me, this happened when I found out that, surprise, I was pregnant with my third child. And my father-in-law was unexpectedly diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and passed away when that baby was just 6 months old. Now, we often find that the lowest points for confidence, professional and personal, because it's not like you can't put one or the other in a box, that professional confidence is distinct from personal confidence. But what I found for myself and found for the many women I've coached over the years is that the low points of confidence often occur when there is this professional and personal crisis combined. We're seeing a lot of this right now with the pandemic going on. So for me, in the midst of this personal crisis, I was also in a professional crisis too, as I just said. I felt like my career had stagnated, and part of it, looking back, was because I had continued to use what I had learned in childhood and in school, to behave, to people please, to seek perfection, to wait for someone else to give me permission to advance. And the worst part of this was that I was, without even knowing I was doing it, conforming to someone else's expectations of what a woman should or shouldn't be at work. And I was losing pieces of who I was in the process. And so in all of this and all of these dark moments, all the what ifs reared their ugly head. And if you've experienced this so far, it will happen in moments of high stress. So once again, if you are experiencing that right now, or you have in the past, or you will in the future, these self-doubts and lack of confidence tend to rear their head when you are under these enormous amounts of stress. So the glimmer of light for me in this dark time was actually some volunteer work I've been doing. It wasn't at work and it wasn't at home, it was volunteer work. I'd been accepted onto a national committee a few years prior. And this particular committee, like, it was completely a shot in the dark for me. I was interested in the topic. It was a business engineering committee. I had no experience, but I just submitted my application, and I'm like, I have no experience, but I really want to learn, and I'll do anything that people need help with on the committee. So somehow I was accepted. But on this committee, pretty much it was like principals of firms, owners of firms, and then there was me. And so given my history with the self-doubts, you would have thought that all of those doubts would have shown up immediately, and I would have just tried to like blend into the background of this particular committee. But that actually didn't happen. For one, on the very first committee call I joined, there was a request made for volunteers to help with a magazine article writing project. So the committee had done a survey, they needed somebody to write up this magazine article. And for me, like, remember I said I had been like kind of losing pieces of myself? For me, I've always loved writing. So I'm like, oh, well, that's something I can do. I'll do that. I wish I could say I like volunteered then and there on the call. I did not. I didn't feel confident enough, but I emailed the person after the call and said, sure, I will help write this. So a year later, I was a published co-author based on that work in a well-respected industry magazine. Now that gave me the confidence to volunteer to present that work at a national conference the next year. And that presentation gave me the confidence to do more presentations and also learn how to network. And the interesting thing happened here, and I'm talking faster than I'm clicking. Sorry about that. Okay, more presentations, network. All that newfound confidence started to spill over into my actual work, and diminishing all those doubts and confidence issues I had been having. to the point that I started to speak up at work. I started to get better at advocating for my ideas. And ultimately, that had a bottom line difference for me, not only in being able to work on the projects I wanted to work on, but I ended up getting a promotion and a raise into an ownership position at that same firm that I had been struggling with like a career stagnation a couple years before. When you have that personal and professional crisis like I did, it makes you ask some hard questions. Questions like, does what I'm doing matter? Am I having the impact I want to have in the world through the engineering field? Because what I didn't tell you about specifically like the personal crisis side about my father-in-law passing away unexpectedly of cancer was this. In his life, he did everything in life that society tells you you are supposed to do. Working hard, holding a steady job, saving money, living simply. And it really hit me because he talked about all the things he wanted to do and the impact he wanted to make when he retired. And he even retired early. And then less than 2 years after that, even though he'd done everything right, he was gone. And so when that happened for me, that was kind of my moment of, you know, if you are not going to take charge of your career, if you're not going to drive it where you want to go, who is? Like, you have to be the one to grab the reins and go forward. And so for me, despite having, I had been gradually building my confidence at this point. For me, the question wasn't about how do I get more confidence to do what I wanted to do. It was, and at that time, I didn't even know what I wanted to do yet, full disclosure here. The question was, how do I want to have the most impact in the industry? And so that's what I want you to think about right now. What do you want from your career? What impact do you want to have? For me, and the answer is going to be different for everyone, but for me, I ended up starting a little side project of writing a book very specifically to help other women engineers. And I had plenty of doubts because at the time, you can see the title of the book, a picture of the book on the screen. You can see the title. At the time, I was working in a very small consulting firm where I was often the primary contact, usually the only woman in the room on my design meetings, working mostly with men. Nice enough men, but still mostly with men. And I had a lot of doubts as I was writing this about what are people going to think. But I kept on coming back to this impact question. And I thought to myself, okay, if my book can help at least one other woman, would it be worth it? And the answer for me was always yes. Like I said, this was a side project. I was working more than full-time engineering hours at the time. And after that book was published, I was still working more than full-time engineering hours. And I started taking vacation days to go talk to people about the concepts in the book. And it was funny, even though I was working more hours than I ever had in my entire life doing both of these things. And did I mention I had 3 kids, all under 7, at the time the book was published. Even though I was working so hard doing all these things, I didn't get stuck. I had an amazing amount of confidence during this time. I didn't get burnt out. I didn't get lost in the what ifs. And the reason was because I was so focused on the impact and the mission and the difference I was making in the world. So I came upon this question that I had discovered first with volunteer work, and then the soul searching I'd done through that professional and personal crisis I was telling you about a couple minutes ago. And I want to share with that question with you now so that you can hold it close to your heart when you hit a confidence crisis of your own in your career. And it's this: how do I use my engineering skills to serve the most people possible? For me, at first, that was doing design work in engineering. then it was writing a book. And ultimately, it was starting my own company, becoming an entrepreneur. And it's not because I knew anything at all about starting a business. I didn't. Or because I always had a dream to start my own company. Also, I didn't. I just knew that this was how I could serve the most people, how I could make the biggest impact. And so I said yes to doing exactly what I know with bone deep conviction that I was put on this planet to do. Now, as I say that, I didn't know that. Like when I graduated from college, I had no idea if I would even be in the engineering industry 20 years after that. When I was in my first job, I thought I would, the first couple years, I thought I would stay in that first company a lot longer than I did. There were so many points along the way where I didn't know what was next. So if you don't need to know. You don't need to have every step planned out along your career path along the way. All you need to do is take the next step and continue to ask this question: where are my skills put to the best use? And here, like I said, you don't need to know. For me, as the founder of a startup that helps women, I still have a ton to learn. I definitely don't know anything. I completely suck at videos, although I'm getting better. I was born in an age where there was no internet in my childhood, so I'm still figuring out the whole social media thing. I imagine a lot of you on this call could teach me a lot. I have tried many things that have crashed and burned when it comes to launching products for my business. But I'm learning and growing and blogging and speaking and networking and doing all these things no one ever taught me in engineering school. And doing those things and being willing to step into that uncomfortableness of things you don't know how to do, that will be a key, and we'll talk about specifically how to do that in a couple minutes here, to building your own confidence and growing into that successful woman that is in you. But here's the thing. So when I committed to serving others in my work, I stopped asking permission. Sitting there asking permission, waiting for someone to tell you what your options are, is a surefire way to end up with low confidence and frustrated with your career progression. And as I said, just keep on asking yourself, how can I serve better? Don't think about if you're good enough. Take action to serve other people to the best of your ability. Okay, so my challenge to you is, continue to participate in our workshop today. I'm going to ask you to think about a couple things that you may have never thought about before. But I'm going to ask you to really stay with me and present, because you get what you put into this. And as we go along the way, say yes to thinking about how you can serve more people throughout your career in whatever role it is, even if you're a student right now. Saying yes to finding your career purpose. And it's going to change. Like I said, you don't have to know now, but to having the courage to look for it, even when it seems like, well, this doesn't seem like the typical engineering path. Okay, so let's just take a moment and think about what this might look like for you. So I'd like everybody, I can't see you, but close your eyes for a moment. And don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to put anything into the chat right now. Close your eyes. Okay, so let's take a deep breath in and out. Okay, so imagine that 10 years from now into the future, you have reached the top of your field. And you are invited to tell your story on a stage to an audience of thousands who are going to hang on your every word and can't wait to hear what you say. Now, if you're an introvert petrified of public speaking, forget that for a moment. Okay. Think about, you're in this room with all these people who love you, believe in your skills, who you have served, and they see you for who you are and value you for who you are. So you give this talk and you tell the story of how you went from where you are now to where you want to be in 10 years. And they are right there with you as you recount your own successes and struggles, your highs and your lows. And at the end of that presentation, they give you a standing ovation and you feel like a rock star in that moment. You think to yourself, man, like it was all worth it. I made it. I did what I wanted to do. I had the impact I wanted to have. I am so fulfilled where I am right now. Okay, so now you're moving to Q&A after this presentation, and you sit down at this table, and there's literally a line out the door waiting to talk to you, to get your insight, to ask you questions, and to thank you for being an inspirational role model. And I want you to really imagine this line of people. Who are they? What do they look like? How do you feel as person after person thanks you for being a leader, asks for your advice, and of course, wants to take a picture with you? I want you to really imagine all those people in your mind. Okay, so you have those people. Now, what story did you tell? What was your story that caused that standing ovation? Okay, now I invite everybody to open your eyes. Now, what you did is you just imagined who you want to serve, and you started imagining, I know I didn't give you a lot of time here, the story that you want your career to tell. And I invite you, we'll give you a number of practical tools moving forward. But I invite you to ask yourself that question and put yourself in this spot again, telling your story, imagining all the people that you are going to impact throughout your career. Next time that you feel like you're not good enough, or you're struggling with feeling confident enough to own your career. All of you listening here today, watching today, you have very specific, unique skills, gifts, talents that are yours. You are meant to have an impact in the world that only you can make if you're willing to lean into those, if you're willing to have the courage to forge your own unique path. And so the reason we're talking about confidence today is because that is the foundation for everything you will need to do so that you can step into this extraordinary woman that you are meant to be. Okay, so that is kind of my story on confidence. And so next, I want to step into some confidence myths. Now, I foreshadowed a bunch of these in the story I just told. We'll go through 3 confidence myths that engineers experience all the time. And then we'll jump into 4 hacks that will help you build your confidence in the moment whenever you might need it. And we will workshop, like I said, each of them so that you have these tools to take with you moving forward. Okay, so the first confidence myth is that, well, I just need more experience, and that's why I don't have any confidence. And this one is false. Okay, so let's look at a couple of statistics around this to help you understand why this is false. Okay, so 70% of people, and this is men and women, I'll do that statistic first, report that they have felt imposter syndrome at work. Okay, what is imposter syndrome? That means that they feel like a fraud. So for me, I can give you a very good example of this. Um, I often had to go to construction site meetings when they were building my projects. And it would be me as the young woman there with a whole lot of older contractor types with a whole lot of experience in the field, a whole lot more experience than I did. And I would often feel during these meetings like I didn't belong. I would feel like I didn't deserve to be there. And I would feel like, well, I shouldn't speak up and I should just defer to whatever they thought because, you know, I felt like the fraud in the room. That is imposter syndrome, precisely. And the interesting thing here is imposter syndrome is definitely not limited to a student or a new grad or someone with 5 years experience or someone with 20 years experience. Even famous celebrities like Oprah, Sheryl Sandberg, Albert Einstein have reported feeling imposter syndrome even after they were immensely successful. So let me kind of put this into another kind of visual context here. So you're experiencing, what happens when you experience imposter syndrome is that you think other people know more than what they do. So in this little visual right here, the person on the left has imposter syndrome. They think what they know is really little and everyone knows a whole lot more than they do. But the reality is what you see on the right side of the screen, and that you know something, other people know something, other people know something, and there's some overlap, but typically you don't all know the same thing, and no one's bubble is like huge as compared to your own. Now, to be clear on this, experience can help you build confidence. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't need any experience at all to be super confident. Typically, there's this thing called professional role confidence, and experience will help with that. But it's important to understand it's not directly correlated with confidence. And this is especially true and critically important to understand if you currently have low confidence, or if your experience consists of doing the same tasks over and over again. As we'll find out in a couple minutes, doing the same tasks, getting experience doing the same exact thing over and over again does not tend to build confidence, and in fact it can actually cause low confidence. So let me give you a quick, pretty famous example of a case where experience and confidence really had nothing to do with each other at all. Okay, does anybody know who this is? If you do, type it into the question box. And she has been all over the news. She has been interviewed on all the major news stations. Okay, I see a couple folks here. Yes, the Goldie Blocks founder. So this is Debbie Sterling, and you can see one of the toys she has created in the screen. And she noticed while she was attending Stanford that the percentage of women of engineering in her classes was really low. And so she decided to do something about it by creating toys to help girls get interested in math and science. You know, now of a point here, you know, she has an engineering degree. A lot of us wouldn't say, oh, like there's a quick jump from engineering to creating toys to inspire the next generation of women engineers. But she did it anyways, and she founded her company just a few years after graduating. She has had huge success, but when she started, she had no experience. I mean, she had her engineering classes, but she had no experience in business, manufacturing, any of those things that you would have looked at and said, is she qualified to do this? If you had asked that question, the answer was clearly no, but she went on and did it anyways. And so that's a very famous example of confidence and experience not being directly correlated. But I really want you to understand here that, you know, you can build the confidence you need, even if, for example, you are in your first job and you're not loving the specific engineering experience you're getting right now. Okay, the second myth that we experience is that, oh, well, I either have confidence or I don't. Okay, this one's also false. And we grow our confidence. So first of all, confidence is a skill set like anything else that you can learn. And we grow that by developing a growth mindset. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I noticed there is an entire session, I think it's tomorrow, on growth mindset. So you can go check that out if you want to learn more about this. But I did want to put up this cool graphic that my company has created that talks a little bit about like how do you know if you're looking at a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. To build confidence, you want to focus in on growing. Growing that. Oh, and Kathleen just threw into the chat that she's doing the session on the growth mindset tomorrow. So like I said, I invite you to go check that out to learn more. The key takeaway for you here as we're growing to build confidence, is that if you are not growing, you are not building confidence. And here's where I think a lot of engineers get stuck. It's comfortable for us to stay in our lanes. It's comfortable for us to, especially when it comes to like engineering design, analysis, sitting behind a computer, for a lot of us, that is so much more comfortable than trying to negotiate with our boss for a raise or a promotion. For raising our hand when there's an important presentation to be given to the higher ups at our firm or a client. And so to build confidence, you have to walk the line between doing things that stick with your skills, but then pushing yourself just a little bit farther so that you continue to grow. Because if you don't grow, as I said, you're going to be stuck in this place where you feel like you have low self-esteem, low confidence, and you won't be able to have the success and impact that you want to in your career. Okay, lastly, the third myth I often hear is that I have to work in a super supportive work environment in order to be confident about my skills. Again, this is a myth. Okay, so a support system is critical to building confidence, but work is just part of that. It's your holistic overall support system that is most critical. So that when I talk about the holistic support system, that could include all your sisters here today, family and friends, peers and mentors outside of where you work now or in the future. What we've found is that, yes, it would be awesome if everyone could work in a super supportive work environment. And if you find one of those for yourself, awesome. Good for you. But what we often find in engineering is that work environments the best way to describe them would almost be apathetic. Like you'll be supported, like people are nice, you'll be supported to some extent, but only so far, which means that you need to understand that you're responsible to shore up your own support system. I know way too many engineers who bounce from job to job to job looking for a mythical support system where they can do every single thing they could possibly want to do in their career. And a lot of times I think the expectations are higher than they should be. Like have high expectations for getting supported at work. But I also think sometimes they are unrealistic. And so I encourage you to make sure, regardless of where you're working, because where you're working is going to change throughout the course of your career. Make sure that you are shored up when it comes to your support system of friends, family, sisters, peers, mentors, a lot of which you can find in industry groups, in groups like this, who you can keep with you throughout your career, and they aren't dependent on a particular employer for you to feel like someone has your back. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the 4 practical ways, aka hacks, to build your confidence. And with each of these, we're going to kind of workshop each of these in the chat. If you are a big writer, you may want to like grab your phone, or well, if you're watching this on your phone, don't grab your phone. Grab a piece of paper or a pencil. It's up to you. But let's get going here. Okay. So the first hack is to take action on things that challenge you. In my own story, I learned about how this, or I shared how the simple act of raising my hand to volunteer to write that article, something I had never done before, sparked a chain of events that led to a massive amount of confidence. And although the specific thing that happened to me is unique, the story is not. In terms of, for many, it's like a domino effect. You knock over that first domino and it sets off this chain reaction of things that will build your confidence. And especially when you're at the beginning of your career, you don't know what that domino is going to be. So that means you're going to be trying a lot of things that challenge you. That may be raising your hand for a stretch project in your first job. It may be accepting a job offer for a role that you're like, I'm not sure I can do this. And because as I said a minute ago in the last slide, we gain confidence when we grow, and we can only grow when we step out of our comfort zone. So, going back to the beginning where we talked about what confidence is. Confidence is knowledge that you can figure something out, or that if you don't know the answer, you know who to ask to find it. So let's workshop this right now. Okay, so here's what I want you to think about. As I shared in my story, what I did was a really small action. I raised my hand to do something I hadn't done before. And so I either write down or put into the chat, what small action can you take today to challenge yourself to grow? I can give you a couple of examples. And I think it's also important to understand here that, as I said, you can't put professional and personal confidence in a separate box. Maybe for you, like one of the things I've done recently is I recommitted to getting my 10,000 steps a day on my Fitbit. And so every day I recommit to taking that action. Maybe for you, you are committing to reach out to I don't know, potential mentor or something like that. Maybe it's simply that, you don't have a LinkedIn profile and you're like, I need to get one going so I can start networking with people. What small action can you take to help your career grow? And it doesn't have to be big. Like, think of something you can do in, I don't know, 15 minutes or less. Now that you've had a couple minutes to think about it, feel free to throw it into the chat. I feel like the more the merrier in helping other people have ideas for this as well. So I see admitting to my manager that this was out of my comfort zone, but that I wanted to try it. Yeah, that takes courage. Registering for a difficult advanced engineering elective, even though it'll make my semester harder. A volunteer. Oh, committing to taking the FE exam. Go, Allie. On a side note, I did fail the FE exam the first time I took it. So um, kudos to you, Allie, for committing to taking it, and good luck to you on that one. Finally, sending in job applications. That is a great one. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to keep on going here just to I want to make sure we have a couple minutes left for Q&A here. Okay, so the second confidence building hack is to acknowledge your wins and incorporate them into your identity. And there's two parts for this. Acknowledge your wins and incorporate them into your identity. Both are important. And so for me, like in my story, when I wrote that article, I started thinking of myself not just as an engineer, but also as a decent writer. And then when I started giving presentations, I started thinking of myself not just as a decent engineer or a writer, but also as someone who could actually do public speaking without like completely messing it up. And once that started happening, I started volunteering for things at work, and the same sorts of things happened. I started getting a reputation for myself in certain areas. Oops. So how do you actually do that? So here are some quick and easy ways to do this. So first is a brag file. I also call this a win folder. So anytime you get an email or acknowledgement about something you did well, and that goes like if you got acknowledgement from if you're a student and got acknowledgement from your professor, if you got an A on a paper you worked really hard on, if you are having a performance review at work, if you had an internship and somebody said something good about you, put it into the file. If it's verbal, I will write it down and send myself an email so it's in a digital file. Then when I have these moments of self-doubt, I go and look at that file. The other part of this is celebrating successes and reflecting on them. If you are in a work environment and you have a team you can celebrate with, that's awesome. But it's also not necessarily the reality for everyone. And so for me personally, I find myself journaling these things. From a neuroscience standpoint, there is something about forcing yourself when you write down a win that imprints on your brain. Let me share real quickly like how that actually works, because while these things seem really minor, they are quick and easy, and they're 5 minutes into your schedule daily, and you can do these things to help build your confidence over time. So remember our definition of confidence. It's a conviction that you have the ability to succeed. So notice that word conviction. Conviction is another word for things you believe. Beliefs are decisions. So from how your brain works standpoint, because beliefs are decisions, when you make an empowering decision like choosing to see your successes, choosing to document your wins, it actually causes your brain to expect more wins. Now, I can get way more into like the scientific side of this, which I'm not going to now, but it literally causes your brain waves to operate differently when you've made an empowering decision. The same can be said for things like meditation or gratitude journaling, which are other things you can incorporate into your schedule if you like. Okay, so for this one, let's practice this. Let's get our brain waves all happy and looking, expecting us to be successful and empowering ourselves. So I'd love to know, what's a large or small win you've had recently? It can be as simple as, I got 8 hours of sleep last night and I've been struggling with that. It could be as large as, I concluded I got the grades I wanted last semester in school, even when everything, shut down and the pandemic happened. It can be a teeny tiny win or a big one. But I'd love for you to put those in so that we can all celebrate with you, because when we see all of those in the chat, it makes everybody feel great. And it's part of, helping the whole community lift each other up. See, I got an interview for a virtual internship happening at the end of the hour. Congrats. Dean's List for the first time. That's awesome. Did well at a work presentation. Presented my final presentation for co-ops. Straight A's. That's amazing. My boss's boss sent me an email thanking me for my work. Made a networking connection. An offer today to return to an internship. Did well in an interview. You ladies are amazing. Graduated cum laude. That is awesome. And so like this is I guess you can see me clapping. That's amazing. Congratulations. But the important thing is to like put this in your schedule. Put the Jeep doors and top back on all by myself. Okay, I cannot do that. Kudos to you, Alexandra, for being able to do that. One thing I found really helpful here is in my calendar, in my phone, every day. I usually do it at the beginning of the day to set my brain up for success the rest of the day. 5 minutes. I say journal successes. And all I do is just like type in my notes thing of my phone. I have a success thing and put it in there. It really does make a difference, and it's completely free and easy. And then on those days when you're like, oh man, I'm having doubts about this, go back and look at that and where you documented all your successes and wins. Olivia asked, what app do I use? I actually use the Notes app on my iPhone. So I just have one note that has successes and stuff in it, and I just keep on adding to it. I actually, that's where I keep the brag file as well, because that way I always have it on my phone if I need it, like if I'm walking into a meeting and I don't have my computer handy. Okay, so the third hack is getting comfortable with vulnerability. And specifically for women, one of the places we have the most challenges overall, and especially as engineers, because we are smart. I think a lot of times we have been committed to being able to figure things out for ourselves, and as a result, we struggle with asking for help. And if you think I'm speaking from personal experience here, I definitely am. I have struggled to ask for help, especially early in my career. So there is this personal self-help guru who you may have heard of. His name is Brendan Bouchard, and he is an expert in high performance and has consulted for people like Oprah, past presidents, numerous Fortune 500 CEOs, billionaires, those sorts of people, and he has studied the traits of high performers. Now, I've always strived to be like a high performer throughout my career, and I'm guessing that you are too, that you value yourself, you see yourself as a high achiever. One of the things his research had found was that confidence isn't correlated to what you know, how much you know. Many of the people he studied, they had advanced degrees and on paper were the smartest people in the room, but they often still struggled with confidence. And what he found was the reason that happened is because they refused to admit any vulnerability, and when they encountered something they didn't know, they faked it instead of asking for help. And so what was observed was that the high performers, the people that went on to the most success, were the ones that when they sat in the meeting, they listened, they asked questions. And when they, for example, went to a networking event, obviously pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, where they went to talk, they didn't know anybody, they were willing to say to the person next to them, hey, I'm feeling a bit awkward here. I don't know anyone. Would you mind introducing me to other people? And they weren't afraid to admit that and ask for help. Because of that, they were able to build connections with other people. And when they didn't know something, that meant that they knew who to ask quickly to help them get to where they wanted to go. Now, to be clear here, when I say being vulnerable, this is very different from oversharing, giving away too much information. This is not a TMI situation here. But building confidence means that when you don't know something, you say so, and you ask for help. You ask the questions so you can learn, and you enlist the support of those around you. That also means that, at work or at school, you're asking for feedback. You're asking what you can do better to improve yourself, which I completely get is often hard for many of us to hear, but it's a critical part of, once again, to build confidence, we have to grow. In order to grow, we have to have feedback on what we're doing well so we can do more of that. So right now, we're going to workshop this one. And I'd love to know, is there one person who you could reach out to now for help in your career? And you don't have to give a name. If you just want to say generally who this person is, a professor, a peer mentor, someone you've met through volunteering, any of that. Do you have that one person? I'm going to keep on going so we get to Q&A here. And then finally, have a growth plan. Okay, so once again, looking at the neuroscience of this, when your brain can see the outcome, it will subconsciously move you towards it. That's one of the reasons why we did the exercise about 10 years from now. What story are you telling and who are you serving? Because when your brain can see what success looks like, it will look for ways to get you there. On the opposite side, if it can't see that, and particularly like if I get to a nitty gritty, I'm doing this engineering analysis and I don't know what success looks like when I'm done at the end, what will often happen is we will procrastinate. We will watch funny cat videos on YouTube or look at social media. We'll feel bored, things like that, when our brain cannot see why we're doing what we're doing and what success looks like. Now, I put this one last. There's a lot of people, non-engineers, who will say they would put this one first. The reason I put this one last is because I found that for most of the engineering ladies I talked to, we are really good at planning. We are really good at planning things to death and not actually doing anything with it. So I don't want, planning is good, and you have to have a plan, but the important thing is to take action on that plan. And so here's what I want you to think about here. You can always take action on learning a skill that will help you move your career forward. And you can do that regardless of where you are employed, if you are a student or not. There's always something you can learn. So what skill could you learn this year or make progress on learning that will help you move your career forward? Go ahead and put that into the chat box. I'm going to keep on going, but I want to give you like probably the top 2 skills that if you really don't know, I would encourage you to practice because they will bear fruit for you no matter where you go in your engineering career. The top 2 skills, public speaking is number 1 because so many engineers are afraid of getting up in front of people and talking. Yet, every person that makes it to leadership needs to have that skill, and it's never too early to practice. I practiced for years in volunteer places where there was no detrimental results to me if I completely bombed before I attempted to do it in my office. So I would say that skill, that is a really good one to start working on. Number 2 is learning to be able to advocate for yourself and your teams. Public speaking plays a part of that, but the critical part there is starting to understand about things like negotiation, building consensus, asking for what you want. those two skills are linked, but if you don't take anything away from this discussion today, those two are ones that will help you no matter what engineering field you are in and no matter where you want to go in the future. Yeah, we have some really good ones in the chat, which I am not going to read right now because I want to get to Q&A here. Okay, so action creates confidence, yet every day we do a lot of things in our life that deflate our confidence rather than build it up. We spend too much time planning and not enough time doing things, especially when it comes to our own career development. We resist asking for what we need, or we rush from deadline to deadline, class to class, project to project, without acknowledging our wins and the successes we have had. So I'm going to lay down a challenge and ask you to make a commitment to building your confidence. We've talked about a bunch of ideas, but I want to know, what are you committing to do in the next 7 days of the things we just talked about to help build your own confidence right now? Okay, while you're putting that into the chat, I am going to invite you to drop in any, also drop in any questions you might have. I will answer the questions at the top first. I'm happy to stay as long as needed to answer those questions. You can also note if you can post them publicly. Some folks would prefer to send them privately. You can just use the drop down thing to do that. And while you are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you all can see me bigger again. And I'm also going to drop into the chat the link to get a free copy of my book. So I just dropped that into the chat. And now, thanks, Kathleen. Oh, and I see some good things. Speaking up for myself, being vulnerable at work to ask for the help I need. That is so hard, so hard. And I understand if you struggle with that because it can be very, very difficult. Okay, let's scroll up. Yeah, if you put in questions earlier in the top, just because we have so many comments in the chat, please go ahead and add it again at the bottom so I can answer them. One of the ones I'll talk about while I'm waiting for more questions to come in was actually in the Whova app. Someone asked, what if you are new to a role or a team and you're just not confident about being in that new role or team? What are some things you can do? So I think the third hack we talked about is the one I would focus on. So when you're new to a role, first understand you are not expected to know everything. If you are new to a role and it's your first job, the best thing you can do for your career moving forward is to ask lots of questions and raise your hand for like everything you possibly can, so you get to try different things and you can figure out where your unique skills, gifts, and talents lie. Like your first job, your first couple of jobs in your first year, I feel like that is your job, is to figure out what you're good at, because you usually don't know. A lot of times you just haven't had exposure to it yet. Any other questions? Oh, thanks, Kathleen. So somebody asked in the app, how do you deal with the internal comparison game against your peers and not feeling up to par? Okay, so I think first, it's important to understand. So there have been a whole lot of studies done on, so I'm going to make one assumption here that sometimes if the peer is, you're seeing, male peers around you that you feel have more confidence and you're like trying to internally compare yourself to them. There have been a bunch of studies done that showing that women will go for it if they will only go for it if they're 80 to 100% certain that they are qualified to do the thing, whatever that thing is, be it a promotion, go after a project, any of those things. Whereas men will do it, will go for it if they have less than 50% of the qualifications. So first understand that where is this comparison game coming from? If it feels like it's a gender thing, I think I would first, hold that awareness that women in particular have been kind of conditioned to not go for it until things are perfect. But then the other thing is you can't win a comparison game, right? You're setting yourself up for failure if you're looking at everyone else and saying, I have to be better than them. What you want to do is you want to be better than who you were yesterday. And understand that you will serve the people, the clients, the folks at work in a different way than your peer will. And comparing is I feel like it's a distraction. It's a distraction in energy. It's a distraction in effort from you getting really good at your engineering skills. So, it's a focus on getting good at your engineering skills and, doing the things that you are meant to do. Not sitting there and playing a comparison game with your peers because you will always lose that game in your own head. Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to take Olivia's question. When I bring up wins with my family or friends, I always feel like I'm bragging. How do I feel bad about it as opposed to feeling bad about bringing them up? Okay, so um, first, so I've had this conversation with men before about the whole bragging thing. And it's interesting because like men don't feel like they're bragging if they say the exact same things that women do. One thing I found, and I understand what you're saying because I will feel the same way. I think a lot of women tend to downplay their accomplishments, yet some level of self-advocacy is needed to be successful, not just in engineering, but in any field. One thing that has worked for me both at work and at home is to talk about it in the collective. So for example, like we had this, I talk a lot in we's. So like my team and I was leading this project. It was incredibly successful. We built a low-income housing facility in a downtown area that's going to get to serve all of these different people. And so, I mean, that was kind of a generic off the top of my head. But what we found is that for women, especially when they, like I led the team, so I didn't say like someone else did it because that's not the case. I led the team and I said that. But my focus was more on look at these amazing things we have done to help other people as opposed to I'm awesome, which will, which phrasing it as I'm awesome will often get blowback on all sides because of like implicit gender biases and things like that. Whereas, looking at it from the team that I led this awesome team that did this is often, at least that's how I get around it. And then I feel more like I'm bragging on my whole team's work and not just my own. Kathleen says there's a question in the app. How do you recommend that new grads make a good impression with their new teams while starting remotely? Okay, so first, this is an easy one, but I feel like there'll be resistance to it anyways. If you are starting a job remotely, I would do everything you can in your initial Zoom calls to keep your camera on. It seems dumb, but people can see you, they can get to know you, you can see other people, you can read body language much more easily. You make connections when you can physically see people much better than you can via phone only, conference call only, or anything like that. So that is like a super easy low-hanging fruit. Number two, I would say over communicate. And this advice would go for new grads and also anyone else who may be transitioning jobs at this time. So for managers specifically, going remotely can require a lot more effort on the part of managers to stay on top of communication with their team. You can make your manager's job a lot easier by being the one that is kind of constantly communicating your stuff. So if you have a question, not letting it fester for 2 or 3 days while you try and figure it out. Sending them an email asking them the question. One thing that I advise people to do when they're working remotely is send at least a once a week email that says, okay, like, here's what I got done this week. Here are my priorities for next week. Manager, can you confirm that like we are on the same page as to like the things I should be working on, the things I should be focusing on. Over communicating will go a long way towards making a good impression and also showing that you are being productive and getting your stuff done. Like there's a double-edged sword there, and that you can demonstrate both of those things at once. Okay. Maya says, I had a co-op where I was asked to do a lot of menial tasks despite it being my second co-op experience. Any advice on how to ask for more responsibility without coming off as rude or as if the work is beneath you? A great question. Okay, so in that case, I would approach um, a little bit of it depends on the context. So if you're in a co-op where you're working with the same manager twice and the manager is aware that you were doing the same thing the previous summer, I would very directly say to them nicely that, hey, I'm super excited to learn more, continue my growth above, beyond what I did last summer. I'm happy to do whatever I need to do to get things done and work on, these specific tasks. But I'd really like to talk about like what else I could do to grow and make sure I'm, learning new skills that will make me valuable to you as a potential like full-time hire down the road. I would be kind of very blunt about that, I would place it in those two parts, that yes, I'm very willing to do whatever I need to do, but I also want to make sure I grow. How can we make that happen? And I would pose it as a question. So not I did this last summer, I don't want to do it again. That's a good way to not get anywhere. But more of I learned a lot. I'm doing this, I'm continuing to learn, but I'd like to learn more. How can we make that happen? Maya, if you have any follow-up questions to that, just type it in again underneath the chat. Okay, Brittany says, hi, you mentioned we spend so much time planning but rarely take action. That is so true for me. I feel like everything must be perfect and I need to have a solution for any possible outcome before executing the plan. In the end, I wait so long. Do you have any tips or advice for how to just do it? I do. That's a wonderful question, Brittany. I too have been very guilty of this. And it's interesting because this seems to be very much an engineering thing. I've talked to women who are not engineers, and a lot of them are like, how can you be so organized? How can, like, I don't even think about planning. I have a spreadsheet for everything. Raise your hand if you also have a spreadsheet for anything. But what I found is like I will plan to death, just like you said, and then not do anything. So here is what I always, I do well with questions. So here's the question I ask myself when I feel like I'm planning and planning and planning. what is one thing I can do in 15 minutes or less that will actually get me moving forward on this? That's not planning. Planning will do that to me. Research, that's another one. Research, right? Anyone gone down like the job hunt research spiral where you spend like 3 days looking for or researching every single person at the company you want to work for, and then you haven't actually put together your job application yet? Yeah, I've done that too. So yeah, ask yourself, what can I do in 15 minutes that actually moves this forward? And then when you do that, what is the next thing I can do in 15 minutes or less? Because I think sometimes we build up these big elaborate plans in our head and they're so big, we don't break them down into like, what's this tiny step I can take? What's this next tiny step I can take? What's this next tiny step I can take? So for me, taking it and saying, okay, let's just take a little step of action that's not planning. Even if it's just, okay, you did all the research, let's open up my resume and finish the, experience section. Let's do that. And then tomorrow I'm going to do the next one and keep on going. And soon enough, you've actually executed the plan as opposed to gotten stuck in planning and research mode indefinitely. Okay, and Maya says, thank you for that. Definitely helpful to have the language to get, yeah, that's that's something I learned the hard way. So I hope, Maya, that helps you. And Brittany says, I have so many spreadsheets. Haha, I do too. You're in good company here. Okay, with that, I think that's all the questions. Kat or Kathleen, do you want to close us out? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. As was mentioned at the beginning, you will get the slides. I'm going to also throw in my email here into the chat. If you ever need anything, feel free to shoot me an email. If you have other questions that you just didn't feel comfortable asking here, feel free. I try to help however I can. So all of you ladies can have the successful careers you want on your terms using your own unique skills, gifts, and talents. Thank you so much, and I look forward to being a watcher in some of the other sessions.